we go. We've
Here
got
we go.
another special episode of the Present and Sober podcast with a returning guest. We've got the lovely Susan Joy with us again today. Hi, Susan. How
Hey,
are you
Susan.
feeling?
Hi, Sam. Hi, Ellie. I'm feeling good. The response to my first podcast was overwhelming. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone who listened and who commented with such kind words and support and gave me the encouragement to come back on this morning and talk some more.
And we're so welcome. We're so grateful to have you here. I think we were all saying, like, the response to your episode was just phenomenal. So many messages from so many different places, and so it was a real gift. And this is also going to be another fabulous episode that I'm sure is going to enlighten a lot of people. So if you're not familiar with Susan, if you missed her episode, and I don't know how you would have done that, but if you've missed it, go back to episode 47 and go and have a listen to that before. Well, please yourself, you can listen to this one first, but it might make more sense to go back to the beginning where Susan shares her story, and it's a heart-wrenching episode. Make sure you have a tissue to hand. So within that episode, we talked about Susan's episode of incarceration, and one of the things that came up was a little flavour of the culture, prison culture, and there was this really interesting thing that stood out for me about how you can be in the depths of your suffering, and yet it can transmute into something so beautiful, and that it really stood out in how I think you said something like, I needed to figure out how to survive this. And so you had this choice, and you had the courage to take radical responsibility for your own experience, and you created something so fantastic, so productive, and of service to others. And it just, that contrast, deep suffering to enormous personal spiritual growth, to me was just like, it blew me away, and it felt like there was a whole episode there. And within that, another thing that stood out when you were talking to us with that original episode was this sort of idea that there's us and them, and the dehumanizing aspect of some of the process. And that hurt my heart, like, big time, to have anybody feel less than. And so what I would also really like to do in this episode is to be able to bring the humanness back and to dispel some of the myths, because look, we don't often get a glimpse into prison. I think some people may have an experience, whether it's a personal experience to do with their personal life, or whether it's to do with their work life, but it's not something that a lot of us have much experience with. And so I'd really like to be able to dispel some of the myths and bring the humanness back to the subject. So I'm really, really thankful to have you here again today, Susan. And where feels like a good place to start?
I think it makes sense to start after I was sentenced. I was sentenced for vehicular assault. And in the courtroom that day, I talked about towards the end of the last episode that I was able to reconcile with the woman who I had hit and injured. And it was, about 8 months after the accident occurred that I was sentenced, and she had had time to recover and listen to my words in the courtroom. And the ability to give her a hug and to know I was leaving my family and the regular outside world to head off for 2.5 years, that gave me some peace in my mind and in my heart. And it started me off with the sense that I was moving forward. I was no longer waiting that waiting to find out if it was going to be 1 year or 5 years that I would be away was really, really hard. So at that point, I'm moving forward and I know what's coming. And just the sense of, I mean, I dressed like I was going to a job interview that day. You know, you want to look as nice as you can for an experience like that when you're going to speak. And the contrast of like wearing those clothes, and then at the end of, you know, a rather formal proceeding, the bailiff walks up and cuffs you. And there's this huge transition to everything is taken away from, just like, you know, the skirt you were wearing, the jacket, the certain things you were hoping that you could take along with you. No, everything in my county was just taken away and you're put into a holding cell. And that's where it really all began. And I think for many people, they don't necessarily understand the distinction between jail and prison. And I know many people trying to become alcohol free have maybe experienced DWI, DUI, and spent a night in jail. And that is very different than prison. Jail is really more of a county level holding area where people that are facing longer sentences wait to go on to prison. And there's also people there that have had, you know, they spend the night overnight because of something that happened. They spend the weekend, those sorts of things. But for me, entering that, I was almost in a weird sense given some respect by other people in the county jail, in the sense that I was going on to prison and I had, you know, been sentenced to 2.5 years, and I waited there for a month and acclimated myself to that situation before being transported. And like I said, it's very different. Prison is more like a city in and of itself, where jail is you're in your own cell, you're let out occasionally. There is a commissary where you can buy some supplies, but it was more getting my mind used to what I was going to face at that point. And I'd say the one thing I realized, you know, when I did some research, I checked out what I could and what I was going to face. And I'd say the single most important asset as I'm thinking about this is your physical health, maintaining your physical first, and secondly, your mental health. Because if something, you need to take care of yourself, because if something happens to you on a physical level, the care is not the same as that you're going to receive in the outside world. So that was always in my mind, that what can I do as far as nutrition, sleep, everything to get me through what was to come.
Yeah, I think just the insight to do that beforehand was very insightful. Like, and yeah, I can really see that. Like, I think it's the connection between physical health and mental health is so strong, right? And they're not necessarily directly correlated. But so did you have what did physical health mean to you at the time? Like, in what way did you sort of say to yourself, okay, I can keep this up, I can do this? What were you doing?
I've always been a practitioner of yoga for a long time, and that took me through. I mean, I was practicing yoga every day in my cell. Something we always have with us, no matter where we go and how much we're suffering, is our breath. And I know both of you are, you know, into breath work and that sort of thing. That sustained me at all times. And as far as physical health, nutrition, as everybody probably presumes, the food is absolutely horrible. There are no fresh fruits and vegetables, like very, very rare. Everything is canned. I mean, it's really sad. But there would be an occasional apple or, some sort of something that would be healthy. And this is going to sound horrible, but I would often trade commissary that I could purchase for other people's apples that they weren't going to eat the fruit. You learn to barter. So I would let go of any treats or chocolates and take people's apples that would want to make a trade. That's something that I continued to do. And, I look back and I feel like, was I really helping other people's nutrition? Probably not. But, you reach a point where you're like, okay, how am I going to eat? And in my county, it was so strange. I was thinking back to this. They would bring us tons and tons of leftover McDonald's French fries. And the county jail was next to a McDonald's. And I kept wondering, like, are these the fries that people are just, not eating? Like, where? And, just situations like that you're like, this is just incredible that this is happening. But I would try to eat as well as I could under the circumstances.
Yeah. It really gets into the level of understanding that's going on at society around the philosophy of what it is to rehabilitate versus punish. And I'm sure we'll talk to this later, but
yeah,
just this idea that it's okay to like malnourish anyone when what we want to do is bring people back into society so they can be helpful, so they can, perhaps give in a way that they've never done before and have some insights that make them positive members of the community. And yet we're going to do something that we know is probably one of the most damaging things we can do to anyone, which is malnourish people. Like it's crazy to me, because I get it. I get that it's important to keep society safe and to have a way of, for violent crime, for example, like, of course, like but everybody is doing what makes sense to them at their current level of understanding. And that doesn't mean that we don't, have a society where people can do some terrible things, but it does mean that we can have compassion even when people have done those terrible things, to know that they weren't created in a vacuum. And like your story, Susan, like, I mean, to say that you didn't see it coming and it could happen to anyone, I mean, goodness, like punish, like, I'm not sure how, I'm sure we'll get back around to that, but just that just immediately, how painful is it to see that we're doing that to people?
Yeah, and what also happens in the county jail and in prison, everybody is looking at the new person that comes in and what can they give me? I mean, as bad as that sounds, they want to know who comes in with money. And in terms of money, I mean, the ability to buy on commissary is everything. And I'm talking, my ex-husband would give me like $50 a month, and that would make me prison rich. Like, he would max out my account, and I was able to buy myself coffee. I was able to purchase like a can of salmon. I think I lived on canned salmon for 2.5 years. But the other thing that happened in those first days was that I had other inmates that my story was in the newspaper that was sitting in front of everybody in county. So they knew I was coming in with some resources. So I literally had maybe 60 women asking me for coffee in one morning.
Wow.
And how do you handle that? And I think there's a tale of boundaries in all this too, because you quickly learn that you cannot take care of everybody. There's no way. And the biggest thing I had read beforehand is don't give things away and don't take things. Keep to yourself and do your time. And as much as, these people's stories are horrible, you can't supply everybody, first of all. But I did learn, like, you can listen to them. You can give them space to talk. And it's amazing how many people just wanted to tell me their story. But that was hard at first. I mean, I wanted to buy coffee for everybody and let's all hang out, but you can't. And that continues to happen as you go through the system, where you're able to get a little bit more and you have people constantly asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Ellie mentioned radical responsibility. And the thing about that is we can only take radical responsibility for our stuff, our feelings, our internal world, and the over responsibility, that many of us have, that many of us carry. Even in as coaches, it's something that we all have our own journey with. And I mean, to learn that in that space, it must have been a huge thing to learn, but to be able to share that with people, because it's a lesson that's applicable everywhere, right? The over responsibility thing, and trying to, because the thing is, if we all turned inward and we all took responsibility for our stuff, truly, the world would change overnight, 100%. If we stop trying to change the world to make ourselves feel okay, and realize that the answer to being okay is through, like you've said, Susan, through yoga, through the true meaning of yoga, unity with who we really are. And I think it's amazing that you knew that from the word go. And I'm sure that was so much of that was down to your yoga practice, I'm guessing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of it is taking care of the body, but it's also the mind, in terms of I found books right away. And someone I stumbled upon early on, there's always books, which is a wonderful resource for people going through this. And I stumbled upon the work of Byron Katie and devoured her book. And I would say the lessons from her experience took me through a lot of my own. That the idea that suffering truly happens when we're trying to fight reality, when we're trying to fight what is. And what is was I was in a cell. I was waiting to go to prison. I couldn't change that. I spent a long time when I was waiting for my sentencing comparing my crime to other people's crimes and saying, how the heck did this person get this amount? And I did this after I was sentenced too. Like, here I am with 2.5 years. And, I remember reading about an airline pilot, to give you a sense of where my mind was at times, that had flown a major airline under the influence and had, tested over 0.08 on his blood alcohol content. And he received about a year. And, here's me going to, how is he flying an entire, load of people across the sky and got 1 year? I mean, you could dive into other people's sentences and wear yourself out thinking about why. And I just had to accept, you're doing 2.5 years. This is what you got. There was a reason. Let it go. Move on.
Do you remember when that happened, that moment where you finally let go to it? Or was it a gradual?
I'd say it was gradual, because I can remember, I think part of me doing that research before I was sentenced was trying to get a better hand on what I would get. So I looked up every vehicular assault case, every vehicular homicide case. And then when I got sentenced and knew my time, I let go of it some in county, but our first day in prison, first or second day, they had an attorney meet with all of us, and we got very official papers about our sentencing. And everybody in that room was doing the comparison thing. And it was also who was on a mandatory sentence and who was going to be able to apply for early release. And I was mandatory, and I would be sitting near someone that had robbed a bank that was not mandatory. So that brought me back to that comparison. But then it was a slow, gradual letting go of that as the experience went on. But I'd say that was an example where I had to bring my mind back to the present moment, and it is what it is.
Acceptance.
Yeah, acceptance. So that was really 1 month in county. And then I was transferred to prison, and I was hearing from inmates in county what prison was going to be like, because some had been there. So I knew a little bit of what to expect. And in some ways, I hoped it would get better, because prison was supposed to have more structure, more, quote unquote, freedom to walk around more and do more things. So I was transferred and sentenced in May, transferred sometime in June. And I remember it was an extremely hot day, and transfer is one of the hardest things I think to go through, because you are cuffed and your legs are shackled.
Mm.
And no one cares if you've gone to the bathroom before you get on the bus.
Mm.
And the driver is completely separated with air conditioning, and you're all just thrown in the back. There were about 5 of us going, and you're just thrown in the back of a van and you're transported. And I think I talked in the first episode of when we did make one stop and having other people just stare at me,
Mm. Mm.
you know, but we were given one chance to stop and use the restroom, get back in the van. It was about I want to say 2-hour drive. I was in Marysville, Ohio, which is the main women's prison in Ohio for all crimes. And we arrived there, and you get to this huge gate. And I remember we just sat in the van, and I guess there's a lot of paperwork they have to do from county level to prison level. And they did not crack the windows, and we had no AC.
Wow.
And that scared me, because I knew I was dehydrating. We had no access to water on the trip. I knew my anxiety level, my talk about fight or flight response in full gear. You know, we were probably in that van 45 minutes to an hour heating up. And then we're let out and entered admissions, which is the hardest part of prison. You're just thrown into, and I guess the best way I can describe it is a giant gymnasium with steel bunk beds, one after another, after another, after another. And you're given, well, first off, I should say, you go through that whole dehumanizing strip search process, because they want to make sure you're not bringing any drugs in, you're not bringing anything in but yourself. So you're completely, you wait in line. I think that's when you get really good at waiting in lines in prison, but you wait in a really long line. I mean, this took half the day of getting people through admissions, through stripping down. All your clothes are taken away. You're stripped to nothing. You are forced to, you know, and I'll be graphic here, but you have to bend over and cough, because people, they want to make sure every cavity of your body is free of drugs. That's their main objective, not to bring drugs into the prison. And then at that point, you see someone, and this is, I think, one of my other strategies I've realized about myself is I bring humor to really bleak situations, because it's the only way I can survive. But one of the steps was categorizing people's tattoos. Like, they had to basically record every tattoo on someone's body, and you're in this huge line. And the person in front of me was just covered in tattoos. And I'm like, this is going to take a long time. And we're talking, you know, a lot of people, because other counties are coming in as well. So we do that. They get to me for the tattoo. Never had a tattoo. Literally, they did not believe me. They're like, checking everywhere. Honest, no tattoos here. You know, but yeah. They were kind of joking with me at that point, like, how did you end up here? You know, people do recognize that I didn't quite fit in. So we get through that. Then we are doused with lice shampoo, which you smell like lice shampoo for 3 weeks after you are doused with it. And it's not pleasant on your skin. It's not Aveda, for sure. It's nasty. And after that, you're given pretty much what you take with you, your bedding and your prison uniform and those things. And you're thrown into the general population, which by that point I was just exhausted, worn out. I knew the heat situation hadn't been good for me. I was starting to feel dizzy and like, okay, I gotta get through this. I'm worried I'm going to pass out. We did sit down for a while, then get a lot of information, and then we're sent to our bunks, which I remember walking down that row of bunks and having everybody that was already living there looking, staring at you like, here come the new people. What do we got here? And having about 10 women rush over offering to make my bed and show me how a prison bed is made. And I'll do this for you. I'll do that for you. And me just saying, no, I got this, keeping to myself. I don't want to get involved with anybody, do my own thing, figure this out. Yeah. So that's a little bit about getting into admissions and getting through that.
Can I just ask you, Susan, like at every step of this, there's just, you must need such resilience and grit, because you're like, your nervous system is shot.
Yeah.
Emotionally, what's going on? Even I loved what you said about bringing humor. I mean, this is part of the reason that we enjoy the podcast so much, because we're bringing lightness where we can to, some really difficult subjects. And I find humor and the lightness, like, it's essential. But even so, it's this extraordinary period of time. Like, it's a big expanse of time. You are physically, emotionally shot. Your nervous system's completely dysregulated. Like, how you, like, I guess the answer is you don't have any choice. Like, your entire freedom's taken away from you. You don't have any choice but to get through it. But I look at you and I just think, like, it's formidable. Like, and I know from my own experience of things that when I look back on tough things that I've been through in my life, I think, how the hell did I do that? How the hell did I get through that? And yet we do. But it's still like it doesn't happen in isolation. Did you feel that there was some residue from that you had to move on through somehow?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we can get to that too, I took a lot of that with me, but you do get through it. Both of you would get through it. You have no choice. And in the back of your mind, you have your picture of your children, that you have to do this. And that day they gave us food at some point, water, we got that. And at that point, I felt like I was gonna pass out, and asked for help in the chow area, and was told just to sit back down. I said, I think I have heat stroke or heat exhaustion from the trip. And there was no, and I ended up vomiting on the cafeteria floor and continued to be sick that night. And at that point, I grew up Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I've always had an envision of a higher power being God. And that night I really turned it over to him and said, I need you to help me have my health back by the morning. I've done what I can. I've hydrated. You sleep all night with bright lights on you. I just, at that point, I was afraid I was either going to wake up and not make it because of my physical health, or I was going to wake up and it was going to be okay. And somehow I believe at that point, God did intervene, and I vomited most of that night, but I woke up in the morning and having slept 2 hours or so, and I felt like I could do it. I felt better. It felt like the water had worked. Something intervened at that point, because that's the most scared I was for my own safety and my own health, was right there. And then from that point onward, I felt like I slowly got stronger physically from the point of that heat exhaustion or whatever it was. And I was shock on my way well. To, just shock and everything. but that was probably the scariest time. And I think too, one of the things I was most scared of was random violence in prison. And I think maybe people think that happens, but it really doesn't if you keep to yourself. People that, I mean, you can imagine a bunch of women put together like that in that kind of situation with everyone's nervous system dysregulated, the kind of drama that goes on. It's just mainly staying out of that. But I did witness in admissions at least 5 physical fights a day, where you slowly become immune to that, what does that say about, to the point where, 6 months down the line, I remember reading a book at one point, and on my bunk in the area I ended up in, and another fight going on, and me almost being like, well, this chapter's really good, I need to finish it. Like, not paying attention to violence that anybody else would be just appalled by. But I had seen it so many times that I was becoming immune to it in some ways.
Yeah.
So I did get moved out of admissions after a month and found my regular living area. And I was with a lot of people that were doing life in prison for homicide. It was not, and some of my friends were shocked by that. Like, why are you, people aren't really divided by their crime. I actually ended up in a pretty good living spot. And the people that are in there for a while doing life, they know how to do it. They know how to, I had a few help me in terms of what to get involved in, what not to get involved in.
Yeah, I think you said in the last podcast, Susan, that it's actually, that's actually where you want to be, with the people that are effectively, going to be there for the rest of their lives, or a long time, because they're not.
Yes.
What do you make of that? What do you think? Is that because, what do you make of that?
I mean, part of it is that they want to forge a good relationship with the correctional officers that are running the unit, which we'd call COs, because they realize they're going to be there a long time. They want to live their best life in prison and not be, you do stupid things and the COs just take everything away from you.
Yeah.
And no one wants that. No one wants to go to commissary, buy supplies, and then have that stripped of you. So they want to go to bed at 10 o'clock, even though the lights are always on. They want to read books. When I got in there was one woman that had a sign on her bunk, "I'll socialize again after this week. Olympics are on." And you do have access to a television after you've been in there a while. So she wanted to enjoy the Olympics. That was her thing. And she doesn't want, the 19-year-old in the next bunk getting TV taken away, or, and at holidays, at Thanksgiving, they organized a whole list where certain people got certain things at commissary, and all we had was microwaves, but they cooked a Thanksgiving feast, involved a lot of macaroni and cheese. But they want to take advantage of the gym, of the library, of the programs. And no one talks about what anybody else is in for, which is interesting.
So not just themselves, but actually no one else is talking about everybody else in there as well. Okay.
Right. Like, it would be very rude to ask someone why they are there.
Yeah, this is interesting, right? The kind of, like, I guess, unwritten code, or the kind of culture that's going, or the subcut that, and the Ellie's going to laugh when I use the word here. Like, we're talking about bricolage, like the things that go, like, so the things that we associate with the culture, be them objects or unwritten code, or how did you find your way into that? Were you just observing? Were there certain people that really kind of gave you an initiation as such that you bonded with? Were there, what was that journey like?
Yeah. A lot of it, honestly, is just common sense. And I think bringing your intelligence with you and I worked as a therapist for a number of years and think I'm a pretty good observer of people. And it's what to do and what not to do. Like, just for an example, you wait in line to take a shower, and there's only so many showers. And you're not going to get in the shower and take 15 minutes, soaping up and taking your time. And you're going to get in there and out and be respectful that there's someone behind you in line that also wants to get a shower.
Yeah.
If just and when it's your turn to clean, that you're going to do a good job cleaning, and that you understand people you are living with deserve that respect. You're not going to be noisy at night. You're going to use your earphones if you do have a television. So, that's what you're supposed to do. So you're not listening to 40 different televisions.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it's, taking radical responsibility for your journey, but part of that being accepting that, you're in a community and there are other people there who also have boundaries. And, if you're going to break those boundaries, then you're going to cause friction that, you don't want ultimately.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I guess the emotional intelligence that you went in with, Susan, was incredibly useful then. Like it was a real, because I guess if you're somebody who has been a reactive person who enjoys friction, then you're going to have a lot more of that in that scenario, right?
Yeah. And I always get questions on, relationships in prison, and everyone thinks that's going on all the time. And it does to a certain extent, but you don't have to be drawn into that. And I think some of it is more, not so much a sexual thing, but people are looking for human companionship. And there's more of a girlfriend thing with, I'll be your friend, I'll take care of you, that sort of bonding. But that's better just to stay away from all of that, because just the drama is, yeah.
So across that, and I mean, we could, there's so much, I'm sure, so much we could explore across those years that you were there. But what are the standout things that you learn, or that you had with you, or the tools, or, both kind of, what are the things that you would love to share with people that we could talk about here?
I think really first I'd say something and want to talk about my relationship with my children during this time, and visits, because visits were, I was 2.5 hours, I'd say, away from my home. And my husband at the time was willing to bring the children, but they didn't come often. There's such a love-hate relationship with visits, because obviously I wanted to see my children, and I'll never forget the first time he brought them, and the embarrassment, the shame, the having my daughter sit on my lap. And I just remember like smelling the scent of her hair, and knowing again I was gonna have to say goodbye. It was extremely difficult. But then on the flip side, there was also that guilt of, I want them to visit as much as they can, but it would drain me for days after they had left, if that makes any sense at all. Because part of what you do is compartmentalize, where I knew both my children were safe. I knew they were being cared for, and then I had to let it go. So they visited me twice while I was in Marysville, and it was hard. It was good, but it was hard. And I also had my parents come visit me, which is a level of discomfort, shame. You want to think about your parents coming to your college graduation, not to visit you in prison. But they were there to support me, and it was important for them to see that I was okay. Yeah. So that was, I think going through something that hard, you do have to somewhat compartmentalize to not be constantly thinking of what you're missing with your children, and knowing that I would be out after a certain amount of time, and I could resurrect that relationship.
It's it's just so bittersweet, isn't it? Because I can imagine that, like that desperation to see them and to hold them and to smell them and to be with them. But as you say, then that you're right back at the beginning of the, like, I've got to see them walk away again. And
yes,
that I can just imagine, as you say, that how long that takes to work through. And I couldn't imagine any other way, as you say, compartmentalizing, because if you stayed in that stuck place, that would just pull you under. So for that period, just after visitation, what would you do to, because it sounds like there's a lot of allowing there. You allowed it to be as it was, and then coming back to acceptance. Was there anything specific within that process that helped you?
I did a lot of walking meditation, almost, where we could walk a track. And part of what was hard was you were never alone. Like, there's absolutely no solitude in prison. You're always around a lot of other people. But for some reason, walking, I could tune things out and just get into my breath, and focus on the here and now. And I guess too, I was thinking coming on today, it gives you a chance. Like, imagine being without a cell phone for 2.5 years. Imagine walking, and it was coming to be fall, and I love autumn, and the leaves were changing, and just stopping and noticing the leaves. And you have all the time in the world, so you can look at the leaves and feel the breeze for an hour. Or I remember watching squirrels. There were so many squirrels in there because I think people were feeding them little snacks, and just enjoying watching the squirrels. And I mean, I forget, now today I'm all caught up in my phone and everything else. When do we go outside and take time with my dog to watch squirrels? And just that message maybe I can give people today of slowing down and recognizing what's truly important and grounding myself to nature. You could take your shoes off and put your feet in the grass, and the grass is the same inside as it is outside.
Yeah, talk about a perspective machine, right? That's, do you know, it's really funny. That was one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask you, was because I think it could be really easy, I guess, to talk about, the stuff that's going on in prison that we really should be doing something about, because it's not helping people come back and be positive, and it's creating this hamster wheel, I think, as you described it in the first podcast. But, the positive stuff around, to have those things like taken away, but then to realize that, oh, actually, there is kind of like a burden is the wrong word, but there's a weight that comes with a lot of the stuff that we carry with us every day as well. And to have seen that, like the turn of the seasons, and to watch it day by day, and like to realize the beauty and the interest in watching something like that, which is like, with Netflix and all this kind of stuff, like who's going to sit and watch the leaves change color? But actually, like, it's wonderful. It's an incredible thing. So yeah, I think that's a wonderful message. That was going to be my biggest question. You've answered it without me asking. So that's really cool.
And I think I never counted days. And it's funny, I never counted days on my becoming alcohol free. I couldn't tell you how many days I have. And I think part of that is my resistance to AA and my resistance to counting days in prison. But I would go with the change of seasons. And I remember telling myself, I got out in November of 2014, and I knew when autumn hit again. So I was very attuned to the seasons, that I knew I would be getting out in autumn and, enjoying the snow. I remember lying in the yard, they called it, and just letting the snowflakes hit my face. And just trying to enjoy the little things that you can. And there was a weight lifted in some ways, like you said, Sam.
How interesting. Yeah.
The burdens of the outside world in many ways are taken away, and you're forced to slow down.
It's really interesting. I felt it because when you were describing going into admissions, I felt the pain of that experience, but at the same time, it reminded me of an echo of being in an ashram and handing everything over at the bit, or like not taking anything with you and just being free to just go, it's just me and my clothing right now, which, you know, and I could think it just goes to show that actually, whatever our circumstances are, we don't have to be a victim of them. Like, there is something we can learn. There is something that we can take from it, however difficult it might be. And I think that's amazing that you found that. And I guess it comes from dropping the resistance. And yeah, that's really special. That's really cool.
And then that sort of takes us to, I got transferred to closer to Cleveland, and was able to see my children maybe once every other month, and then was in the dog program and did some of my yoga teaching, and was able to establish, because that's considered a less security as far as prison goes, and just getting into I was there the rest of my time, of the structure of it, of having a job, of showing that I could, you know, do what needed to be done. And as the longer you're in there, you do make connections. You got to be careful who you make connections with. But I ended up working for the psychiatrist there, doing office cleaning at one point. And he was a wonderful connection, an older man, and just so kind, and was able to talk to him. And he loved dogs, and I would bring the puppy in, and he when I had my puppy in, he would bring in outside dog toys, which was like contraband. That's the only contraband I brought into prison, was dog bones and dog toys. But, yeah, so it got easier over the long run. Yeah, and that took me to 2014 when I was looking at my release date.
And how did that feel?
Scary. I had to know where I was going. And at this point, I have, we know we're getting divorced. He did not divorce me while I was in prison. And I'm forever grateful for that, because that would have been extremely difficult for me to represent myself through a divorce process.
Yeah. And
he wasn't going to at first, but did allow me to come back to our home. And we talked, and he said, I'm going to give you a month or so to find living arrangements. At that point, I could have fought for my house. I could have fought for full custody of both my children. My oldest daughter was in college at that point, and my youngest daughter, Sarah, was in 6th grade. And I came home. I remember that day, he did pick me up and brought me back to the house. And I think he left for like 4 days, and I was just with the kids again, which was wonderful. But also, I couldn't drive for 3 more years because my license was taken away. So that, and we were in a suburb. So there was a lot to adjust to. And imagine Sarah was 10 years old. It was like 3rd grade to 6th grade. And all of a sudden her mom is plopped back into the living room. It's just huge adjustment. And I think this comes back to, again, not resisting what is, because at that point she had formed a bond with my ex-husband that I completely understood, and that it was really hard, because I almost felt in a way like a stranger in my own home.
Yeah.
And had to take it very slow. with both my children.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard. I remember she was into volleyball, and we went to a volleyball tournament, and we drove together, and she, I don't know, got hit with the ball or something happened, and she was just, crying, little 6th grader, 12, 13 years old, and immediately ran off the court and hopped into her dad's lap, not mine. And, at the time, it made me want to cry, honestly. It was really hard. But I needed to understand what had happened, and that she would slowly come around to me again. And of course she did, but it took time. It took a lot of time. I moved out into a condo. She had a room there where we decorated it and we made it all fancy for her, but she didn't want to leave the house. And, I've had some judgment from friends of, well, why didn't you force her? Why didn't you take him to court for full custody? It would have been a battle if you knew my ex of, he wanted to control things, and I had done what I had done. So again, I accepted. I would have her on weekends. He traveled a lot still for his work, and I would stay at the house when he traveled and take care of everything. And we cooperated, and I give both of us credit for that. We did what was best for our 2 children at that time.
I love that you had that in a compass. So, because it would be so easy to listen to other people, and it would be so easy to fall into that mechanism of trying to control things and change things and have it be different. And in all likelihood, that disconnection, there'd be even greater disconnection. Like, I can just imagine trying to force a soon-to-be teenager to be in a situation that doesn't feel safe to them. And I don't mean any judgment in that. I just mean like it's a wrench from what they've known for such a period. So whilst, like, emotionally you've had to not take on a lot, but you in that allowing, that's exactly what bridges that connection. But it's to have the patience to allow that to unfold in its own time, as opposed to trying to force it. And that grasping, that clinging, that craving, that tension. We talk so much about how awareness is just such a beautiful gift, because it opens up choice, and we're empowered. And what we see so frequently is, and myself included in this, you have the awareness, and then it's like, all right, and I've got to fix this, I've got to change this, I have to do something. And more often than not, there's nothing to do. But it can be so challenging to include whatever the thing is, to include all of the feelings and the experience. And this is why the lady that I was talking about before we came on to record, who you'll be in touch with soon, I was saying to her, like, this lady Susan, she's like nobody I've ever met before, and I don't know where she's going, but something big's going to happen with her, because to have that and I guess it's a bit different, because we're talking about some of your story in, like, we haven't got the whole context, we're not living through the entire experience, but you just seem to be very, very grounded, and very, like, even when all of your freedom's taken away from you and you're put in the most horrific conditions, like, I feel a bit silly, I didn't realize that the lights are on all the time. How anybody can sleep with the lights on all the time, all of this stuff that is, it's like torture, and yet you found the present moment, and you could accept, you could include all of this stuff, and you could allow it to be there. And because there's no resistance anymore, there's such beauty available in the most challenging, horrific circumstances. And so I'm just I'm just delighted to be able to spend any time with you at all. And I know you'll be helping so many people already, but I'm prophesying there's something big's going to happen with you, and I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to see what's next for you.
Thank you, Holly. That means a lot. And yeah, it took a while to rebuild relationships. And it's funny, we talked about dogs and the part they've played in my story. And I have 2 golden retrievers now. Maggie is 5.5. And when Sarah was in 8th grade, so 2 years after I got out, we got Maggie together in a second condo I was in. And I really used Maggie and the whole experience of getting the puppy. It was a wonderful bonding time for my daughter and I. And my ex-husband had said, no more dogs, they're not having a dog. Mom can get a dog. And so that brought us together, and then she got her driver's license. And again, I did not rush her in terms of being over my place all the time. We let her, where you want to stay is where you want to stay. You have rooms at both of our places. And now to bring it full circle, I have an 8-week-old puppy in the bedroom that Sarah and I picked out just a couple weeks ago when she was home for Easter break for college. And she'll be home later this week for the summer. She's done classes. And yeah, we have a wonderful relationship now, and been to her college several times this year for visits. And she's so proud of what I'm doing and of me telling my story, and my ability to talk to her about alcohol and what it can do. And the fact that, it took everything from me, but it wasn't until I truly saw that it didn't help me relax. It didn't help me deal with any of this. And I found this naked mind, that I found true freedom from that substance. Because we didn't really get into today, but I had talked at the last episode of when I was going through some of my feelings of sadness with my children and all of that. I started to have that glass of wine at night to numb that, because that's what I had known. And I never drank and drove again, but I was using it at times to numb, and to truly be away from all that now since 2020 has made me, help me look at this and realize I did the path. And I remember opening up on the first time with Coach Carla Atkins, and who had her own experience. In fact, she called me yesterday after listening to the podcast, and I related to her like I had never related to anyone because of what she went through and her story. There's such different stories, but there's a level of shame that we just could relate. And I opened up to her for the first time on the path. Yeah.
Well, and there's another wonderful human being. Carla's I'm a big fan of Carla too. She's an amazing lady, and she's lined up as well to come on and talk to us soon. She's got some super exciting stuff going on too.
I know.
Well, hey, I don't. There was just me and Ellie had such curiosity to chat with you about this, and overwhelmingly, I'm just hit with the wisdom of throughout all of that, no matter how difficult it got, it feels like you could see that life wasn't happening to you; it was happening for you and by you and through you, and that is such a powerful message to have with you. And like Ellie said, I'm sure that energy is no doubt gonna have such an amazing effect on people. And we're so humbled and happy that you came and started this, you came and shared your story in full, like you said, here with us. And yeah, honestly, that's a real privilege. So thank you so much for doing that. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that we all sit down and have a chat together.
I know there's so much to talk about, and yeah.
So, hey, you shared a bit about how people can reach out and contact you on the last podcast. Like, there was your website and you spoke about, but is there anything you want to just remind people of how to reach out? If anything here in particular has resonated with them, or what's going on, or is anything, let us know that stuff.
Really, hop on my website,
Cool.
SusanJoyCoaching.com, and take a look. I started a blog. I need to work more on that. I've been certified since December of last year. So I'm really just getting my business going. And I'm not a huge social media person, but when my daughter is home, she has promised to help me with that and get me going on Instagram and all those things.
That's what you need.
I know I need it. But yeah, so that'll be up and coming, and I have accounts, but mainly my website now. Anyone's welcome that wants to chat to reach out for a discovery call, and yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been fascinating and wonderful, and I just really appreciate you and that power of sharing story and being able to connect with all of our humanness. I think it's just, it's so important. Thank you.
Thank you.